Yes. Hello, me mateys, and welcome to a special Talk with a Pirate Day edition of the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Cameron Reigle.
And the podcast you're about to listen to would have once been unthinkable. Both Cameron and I have been fans of Rare for probably more than 2/3 of our lives at this point, and for me personally, and for many of our listeners, no other studio has ever exemplified the magic I look for in video games, and probably all of entertainment, better than Rare. So when it was founded by Chris and Tim Stamper, the studio's philosophy towards fans and the press was one rooted in secrecy. And there was fan interaction in those early days, especially when the internet got up and rolling with, the classic Rare website headed up by Lee Loveday. But, Lee Loveday was essentially the mouth of Sauron. The rest of Rare stayed behind the black gate of Twycross, remaining anonymous names in the end credits of our favorite games. So it's with much surrealness that we welcome with us today Mr. Craig Duncan, the studio head of Rare. So, Craig, thank you so much for agreeing to take part in our idiocy.
I don't actually know what to say after that intro. You've just placed on me the momentous scale of the studio I run by that historic opening. That's it's great to be here.
It's like I said, it's surreal, and it's probably going to take me an hour just to get over that feeling. I know Cameron feels the same.
Oh yeah, definitely. But it certainly helps having met you earlier this year. And Craig, I have to say, you are one of the nicest, most personable people I've ever had the pleasure to meet. So that's made this a bit less weighty. Thank you. It was great to hang out with you guys and a ton of other people that support Rare with all the passion and energy and vigor that you guys do, and others that were there at E3. It's one of the things that humbles me and the team every time we do anything that's remotely public. What we do as a studio is to try and entertain people and make things that we love, that we hope other people will love. And when, I even struggle a little bit with the term fans or fandom. Of course, I'm a fan of studios and games as well, but it's, to me, our community and the people that support us are as important as, the team I'm lucky enough to manage that make our games.
Yeah, vigor is a nice, polite way of putting, I think, the insanity that spews from your more dedicated fans, and I include us in those ranks. Now, yeah, as Cameron, you just said, we've met several times. Just like a bad case of convention flu, you can't avoid me when E3 comes around. And as Rare fans, we're fairly well acquainted with who you are. And I think, let's just get all the sycophantic stuff out of the way now. We're big admirers of not just what you're doing with Rare, but honestly, you as a person as well. So you don't have to win Cameron and I over during this interview.
Phew.
But
That's good.
But what I wanted to, get to is, let's be honest, there is a hefty chunk of the audience that listens to the Kongversation that are Rare fans because of the Nintendo days, the Nintendo 64 era.
Yep.
And there are a lot of misconceptions about Rare as an entity under Microsoft that persist to this day. So I was hoping we could use this opportunity to help clear the air and maybe get some new converts over to the Sea of Thieves Insider program. So we're just basically doing your dirty work here, Craig.
Like I say, we've chatted and we've actually had this conversation before, and you guys have been very very honest about kind of your thoughts of Rare, good and bad, and asking the right questions. And I think for us, we're
and this is a change from what Rare used to be. We're very open, and it's certainly something that myself and Joe, as well as people that have been in the studio a long time, Greg and Louise and Ryan and Lee Loveday, and I think once we decided to be very open and we have the term internally, open and transparent about what we're doing and what we want to talk about, we're more than happy to engage in those kind of conversations. I think what's always interesting to me is when you get a studio like the Rare that is secretive, then people write their own stories of what goes on and what happens. It's kind of funny for me because, when I took the job on, and I had a conversation with Phil Spencer, I had a conversation with some of the other Xbox leadership at the time, and it was really, and I did my own research, and I read the internet, and I read NeoGAF, and I read what everyone was saying about what Rare was doing or not doing. And I absolutely walked into the role with my eyes open, knowing that, as well as, and I knew there was super talented people there, but there was a big perception to change about what Rare is. So I absolutely walked into it knowing that, and when I think back to what people thought Rare was 5-6 years ago to where we are now, we've come a long way, but we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, I think that's something we definitely want to get into greater detail with you here coming up. But
I've got 4 hours. I've got my sleeping bag. It's good. I've got the snacks. We're good.
Yeah, I guess we'll start off with actually asking some questions. This is an interview, I suppose. So you went into a little bit about you starting at Rare with the Phil Spencer. This is actually a story that I don't really have any details about myself, speaking of just sort of unspoken histories. I imagine becoming studio head of Rare isn't just something that happens where one day somebody throws a pair of keys at you and says, here you go. So what sort of career path was that like getting to where you are now?
Wow, that's a good starter question. I'll try and do the super abridged short version. When I was a boy, no, I won't start that long. I've been lucky in my career. I got to, I managed a software engineering company before I got involved in games. I took my first games job in 2002, working for Codemasters, and they were going through a little bit of a growth phase at that time. I think there were about 100 people. I did a few different roles there. I worked in their external development team with Bohemia Interactive, making a game called Operation Flashpoint. We did some expansions for them. I worked with some UK teams on Colin McRae Rally. I then took over that studio internally and worked with them. So did a ton of roles over 5 years at Codemasters. Worked on Clive Barker's Jericho, Overlord, with Triumph Studios in Holland. Worked with some US teams. Did a ton of stuff. Literally, if you look at anything Codemasters did through, like say, 2003 through to about 2007, 2008, I had some small part to play in most of that stuff. Then took a job to head up Midway Games in the UK, up in Newcastle. So I think by that point I'd built a little bit of a sort of reputation for being, pretty straight, honest, good at what I do. And when you do the kind of job I do, I mean, I manage big teams. A lot of it is just trying to remove noise and blockers and problems that stop people doing their best work. When bits of teams don't agree, getting them together and having a path when, people aren't necessarily focused on what's best for our players or our game or what we're building, dealing with that kind of stuff and just making sure that, you have a team and organization that's trying to do its best work. And building games is complex. And, it was complex when I first started. It's even more complex now. So just, making sure that the and I'll try and avoid pirate seafaring puns, but the ship.
Oh, it's Talk Like a Pirate Day. This is the one day of a year where it's not frowned upon.
Yeah, I mean, the ship's kept afloat, and that we know what our voyage looks like, and we know what's ahead, and when it's rough waters, keeping the ship in the right direction, and when it's calm waters, celebrating what we do, and making sure that the kind of crew keeps well oiled and working together. So there you go. There's all the pirate stuff out of the way till we get.
I didn't realize you'd have a whole book of them at the ready.
We use them all the time at Rare. We're more than you.
I'm curious if you guys run into the same problem we do constantly on the Kongversation, where you try to use rare as the common adjective, meaning uncommon, and people think you're trying to do a bit. Does that happen all the time?
I keep pushing the team that the rare chest in Sea of Thieves should be worth more than everything else, but I'm fighting a losing battle. They're just not going for it. And there's a bit of me that's like, hey, it's my studio, like, do it, but that's just never really been my thing. So I just keep suggesting it, hoping that one day someone will listen and Greg or Mike will actually go make that change. But yeah, so I privileged to do a lot of stuff. I actually joined Midway Games, and there's probably a whole podcast in this, when it went through, and you guys are gaming fans, it went through a bit of a change of ownership and actually went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the US parent company. So I had that unique experience of managing a UK studio while its parent US company was going bankrupt. Which was super fun in lots of ways, and I learned a lot, and really kind of pushed me to what kind of leader I was, and essentially dealing through a pretty extensive crisis while still managing to ship a game and create a new IP in the process. And then when that, sadly didn't go the way I wanted it to, and I'm not one that likes losing, generally, I like to set out to do things and succeed. So, when a studio I was managing ultimately got sucked into the bankruptcy and we had to close, and there was a few Phoenix from the Flame studios that came out of it. So, people did okay. Actually not succeeding wasn't something that I was super familiar with or too happy about. So a lot of sort of thinking and learning from that. Then I helped a studio called Sumo Digital that I'd worked with a little bit over the past few years. They were going through a bit of a leadership kind of growth challenge. They were growing as a studio, so helped them, managed some projects for them, shipped a couple of racing games, one called Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, where halfway through that project, we had a chat with Microsoft about it featuring Banjo-Kazooie, which was kind of, was like, oh, I remember Banjo from Rare. And we engaged with the Rare team at the time about putting Banjo in the Xbox version. So if anyone played Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing on Xbox, you'll remember that. And again, that was a lot of fun, and probably my first interaction with Rare. And what I found was interesting is Rare, given all their history, given all their secrecy, given that at that point I kind of knew everyone who was everyone in the UK industry, I didn't really know anyone from Rare. And they even kept themselves quite sort of secretive, which was very much their thing. So we did that little collaboration. I then carried on at Sumo Digital, and then I got a mysterious email, which was, and I won't go into kind of who sent it, but was very much like, hey, your name came up in a conversation today about a UK leadership role, and would you be interested in having a conversation? So I reached out, we had a conversation, there was a couple of phone calls and a couple of meals, and then somewhere in that flow of conversation, Rare got mentioned, and then, and this is probably a little bit about me, this is when my eyes light up, and for me, it's not only hey, that's Rare and games I grew up playing, and but also, you know, from a career and professional point of view, hey, like that's Rare, and you know, you know, I'm pretty good at what I do. I go bet on myself to let's see what Rare is. Let's see what it can be. And this was just at the point where they're about to. I think they were either about to ship or had just shipped the first Kinect Sports. I didn't really know what was going to happen. Now, of course, you know, Kinect Sports, the first one, went on to be hugely successful, and you know, that birthed essentially one of the biggest franchises on Xbox. And again, I know a lot of the a lot of the Rare fans that have been with Rare a long time, you know, definitely didn't look at that era favorably, or the Microsoft era favorably. But I think what's interesting there is, you know, the studio I walked into had, you know, made a few different games. I mean, Viva Pinata, one of my favorite franchises. It obviously done Banjo Nuts and Bolts, which again I know is kind of has differing opinions around it. Again, I think there's some quality in that game, as well as some of the other stuff they've done in the Xbox era, like, you know, Cameo and Perfect Dark Zero, and you know, some of the XBLA reboots. And you know, but Kinect Sports was like it hit. And it hit in a big way. And then, so the kind of studio I walked into was like, hey, we've done all this stuff, and now we've had this thing that's been successful. And I think even, and I know Phil's kind of said this before, you know, I think, you know, Phil's the kind of leader that ultimately backs his studios and backs his team. And it was actually awesome. Rare had some great success. Now, you know, some of that was just Kinect being successful and riding that wave, and some of that was obviously the excellence that was in those games. And even, you know, whether you're a Rare fan of old, Rare fan of new, or, you know, maybe an 8-year-old kid that's playing Kinect Sports for the first time, like, those games had a lot of fun and charm in them. And I think, you know, obviously anyone that worked on them, I'm sure, was super proud of them at the time. So for me, walking into that team was very much like, okay, here's what I've done. I knew what the history was. And then for me, it's like, really, okay, and this sounds a little egotistic. I'm not an ego guy by any stretch, but like, what do I want my Rare to look like? What do I want it to represent? What do I think the future is? You know, and when you go into a studio, and I was the first senior leader that Rare had hired outside of Rare. It brought people in before, it promoted people up, but it hadn't really hired a new boss before externally. So of course, you know, that brings with it, I'm sure, a lot of opinion from people I kind of came in to lead. But also for me, it was very much, okay, let's see what we've got, you know, what the strengths of the studio are. I knew there was some incredible people there, which, you know, still work for me to this day. So that shows what I think of them, and some. But for me, it was really like, what do I think is here as a studio, and what do I think we can achieve, and how do I, you know, do what I do, which is help them do their best work, and how do I set Rare up for, you know, the next 10, 20, 30 years to be successful. And then kind of 5 years flew past really, really quickly. And I think I'm 6 years and a bit now. And honestly, like, it's been a blur. And we've done so much in that time on a number of things, on strategy, on team makeup, on community, on changing what Rare is, changing what it represents. You know, we've built and launched a new IP. We launched Rare Replay in that time. We, you know, tried to show what you know, Kinect V2 would do on Xbox. Like, we've done so much in that 6 year period. And I'll admit, you know, it probably took me longer than I thought it would. And it, you know, when I kind of went into Rare all bullish and feeling, you know, feeling sure of my own ability. Yeah, you know, give me a couple of years, I'll get things sorted out, and Rare will be back to, you know, being the best at what it does, whatever that even means. And the reality is, you know, 6 years later, I feel great about the progress Rare has. I'm so excited about Sea of Thieves, as anyone will know that's spoken to me about Sea of Thieves. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on that, because I think it's genuinely...
We have.
You guys have done many. Because I think it's genuinely... It's the kind of game that only Rare could go make today. And it's so full of what Rare is, but it's also so forward-thinking and progressive in the kind of game it is. And I'm so proud of the team for, just coming up with the idea of what Sea of Thieves, but in all the execution, all the work we've done with community, all the things we've done around opening up what Rare is. We've there's been a massive turnaround in what we've done, and that's credit to the team and all the hard work they've put in.
You mentioned you were an outside hire, so you weren't promoted from within Rare, as had been the norm before this. So, as a Rare fan, as somebody who's been a Rare fan, essentially the longest relationship of my life at this point, what are your favorite Rare games? And anything released after you joined the studio does not count. So no cheating.
No Rare Replay, no.
No, absolutely not. Rare Replays, no, the most obvious cheat. Avoid that at all times.
Sea of Thieves is the favorite, coming soon.
Yep, that's it. This is where, if this was a proper press interview, which it obviously isn't, I would be straight in.
Oh, thank you.
I mean that as a compliment. Apologies for any journalists that may be listening. I would go straight into pitch mode around the future of gaming. No, a couple of Rare things for me I thought were super interesting. One was Viva Pinata was massive with game developers. More than what I think, and it has its following and it has its fandom. But if you think about that early kind of 360 launch portfolio, and I was at Codemasters at the time, and it was one of those games I think was really kind of misunderstood for what it was, and it was actually quite ahead of its time in a lot of ways, which Rare have done that a few times, sometimes to a fault. But literally, I'd walk into the QA team at Codemasters and they were all playing Viva Pinata. And it was like, okay, and it was just one of those games where I think just the simulation of it and the kind of comparison and the fact that everyone's games were playing out slightly different and people were it wasn't handheld. So people were sort of figuring out, the food chains of which pinatas attracted which pinatas and then comparing. And it actually, I think there wasn't a lot or maybe any games that were doing anything like that. And then add to that the garden and the art style, which, Ryan Stevenson, certainly one of the most talented artists in the business. And, it was just this magical mix that captivated everyone. And I remember one of our QA guys going, hey, you should go play this. And probably like a lot of people sort of watched it for a bit, didn't really get it, and then went and played it, and it completely hooked me. And then, like I say, I'm old enough to remember even going further back than that. A good friend of mine had a NES. I remember playing Battletoads. I kind of definitely did a lot of my gaming through the SNES era and Killer Instinct coming into that, and Battletoads versus Battlemaniacs and Battletoads versus Double Dragon, and I kind of, I suppose in that, those 90s through, I guess SNES, and then I was a big Amiga gamer, which obviously Rare didn't do anything for. Maybe they did. Rare did so many games. It was kind of funny when we did Rare Replay and we looked back through the back catalogue. Rare did platforms and ports of stuff that I didn't even know was Rare. They made a Sesame Street game on the NES, and you guys are probably laughing at me now as studio head because you guys know everything about Rare, but there's stuff Rare's been involved with that literally blew my mind. They put hundreds of games out in that era, of all different sizes and shapes and ports, and some were licensed and some were own IP, and this is why it always cracks me up when people go, hey, like, this is the kind of game Rare makes. And if you look back through Rare's history, like, I can't put my finger on what kind of game Rare makes, because they've made every kind of game. So, quick answer, Viva Pinata and Battletoads, I spent a ton of time with. But I played everything before I took the job on as well. I actually had to reset my Xbox Live account, so no one I knew in the games industry would know why I was playing lots of Rare games in the weeks that I was talking to the Xbox guys about joining the studio.
I've never considered having to be anonymous in my gaming. Everything I do is just out there in the open. So,
yeah, I mean, you can imagine, like, when you, like, because you work and play games with people that you work with in the industry, you know, in a world where everyone kind of knows everyone, right. The fact that I would be playing lots and lots of Rare games in a short space of time publicly on Xbox Live, you know, probably is a good tap. Like, hey, why is Craig playing loads of Rare games? Actually, when I went to visit the studio for the first time, it was about 10:30 at night. And because, again, like, there were people that worked at Rare that had either worked for me before in different roles, or, you know, again, people, you know, may have known who I was, or it might have leaked that, you know, you don't really bring a new studio head in and walk him around while everyone's sitting working, or else, you know, news probably gets out pretty quickly. So my first meeting at Rare was by night at about 10:30, and they'd asked some of the leadership team to stay behind to come in and meet me, and I literally walked around that building, and you've seen that building, Hyle, from your visit. I mean, it's hard to navigate during the daytime, but yes. come in by nightfall. I literally felt like Batman walking around the building at night, being taken into meeting rooms to meet with various different people. It's the most secret interview process I've ever had, but awesome all at the same time.
Honestly, one of the proudest moments of my life was when I was able to navigate back from the restroom to the conference room at Rare and didn't get lost.
Yeah. You know, that's where Captain Bones came from. That was someone that did get lost, and then we found him like 20 years later. That's not true, by the way. Just in case.
No. That's official canon at this point. Okay. It's word of God.
Yeah, and we don't throw disgruntled staff members in the lake either. Like, that is also a myth.
Oh, you're just ruining all the illusions.
Yeah, sorry about
that. I noticed in one part of your story that was kind of fascinating to me was it sounds like Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing with Banjo-Kazooie was kind of like your nexus point, and I mean, I'm a big fan of that game and its sequel. I could do an entire podcast about that, but
we should do that, because I'm a big fan of those as well.
So it got me thinking, what are some of your favorite titles that you enjoy outside of Rare, just in general? I'm sure you have wide tastes.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the age thing, I mean, I turned 40 last year, and I still try and play football and do other things that keep me young. I'm sitting here drinking red wine, which probably ages me, actually. But I mean, my youth was pretty misspent playing video games. And this is where, again, you know, we talked about earlier, like, the whole, you know, kind of, you know, whether it's fandom or whether it's, you know, like, you know, you guys going, hey, it was awesome the way we stood and chatted at E3 about games, and that to me is like, it's the best part of the job. You know, I grew up like you guys. I'm a guy that just played a lot of video games. You know, I'm lucky. And when my mum said that, hey, stop playing those video games, you're never going to achieve anything if you just sit around and play video games all day. You know, I realize I'm super lucky to be the one person that, you know, when I go see my mum, she doesn't really know what I do. She just knows that when I say, hey, remember those kind of, you know, computers and video game consoles you bought me, then that's good. That shaped my career. And I did, you know, I kind of, you know, I sort of spent a lot of my, you know, I guess my late 80s and 90s, you know, playing a ton of SNES games, you know, a big fan of RPGs, played, you know, stuff like Secret of Mana and Chrono Trigger, and like loved Secret of Mana, probably my favorite game of that era. Played a lot of fighting games, you know, KI, like I talked about earlier, Street Fighter 2, in various iterations. Final Fight, that was a real great gaming generation. Had an Amiga for a number of years. I don't know how popular they were out stateside, but massive in the UK and Germany. Commodore Amiga, playing loads of things like Cannon Fodder and Eye the Beholder and Dungeon Master and all the Cinemaware games. Wings was one of my favourite games ever. If you ever want to play a World War II fighter pilot game, go play Wings on an emulator. Moonstone, just played everything, like literally played everything I could get my hands on, then went through a little bit of a PC phase, and then I remember Ridge Racer on the original PlayStation literally blowing my mind, like a 3D car going up through a tunnel, and just how amazing that all looked. Had a ton of fun on the Dreamcast. Loved, I think, the whole Dreamcast portfolio. And just going back to your statement, Cameron, it was kind of funny because Codemasters was a great company and very British company, and we did some good stuff and shipped a lot of good games. When we first started doing Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, and Sumo had done Outrun and Sonic Superstar Tennis before that, it was actually some of the kind of Sonic fandom and some of the Sega IP fandom that I guess first really made it click to me that, people are absolute, super fans for certain IP and genres and characters. Because obviously, Sonic's got a big fan base. We put the forklift from Shenmue in Sonic and Sega All Stars Racing as well, and when you do stuff like that, the people that really, really love those IPs get super excited. So when we, again, to bring it back to the Banjo story, when we sort of said, hey, what can we do for an Xbox platform exclusive, which is something games did then as third party. I think for the Nintendo Wii version, we put the Mii's in so you could have yourself driving, which and I honestly think we made the best kart racer outside of Mario Kart. But when we started looking into Banjo, it's kind of then that it was like, oh, Banjo's got its own fandom, and then it kind of reminded me what Rare was famous for. And I know literally everyone listening to this that's a DK Fine kind of advocate will be going, hey, he mentioned SNES twice and he hasn't mentioned Donkey Kong. I owned Donkey Kong Country and I owned the second one, and I played them. And again, don't send people around to my house, but I was definitely, I think I was more on the RPG side, and I think I just remember wasting more time with some of the kind of SNES RPGs, and maybe that was just kind of who I was at the time. I was reading a lot of fantasy novels, a lot of David Gemmell, a lot of doing some like pen and paper role playing, and just that phase. And I kind of played Mario and I played Donkey Kong Country, but they never really sort of captivated me at that time. But what, and I have a question for you guys, because I don't know whether it's official DK Vine canon or not. But I loved Donkey Konga on the GameCube. Like literally loved it. Is that part of the DK Vine universe or not?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay,
and
I just want to check.
My perennial struggles with the sequel, Donkey Konga 2, are almost legendary in our community at this point. Considering,
okay. So
it's virtually impossible to beat it in single player, and yet I'm still trying to do it to this day. So
I reckon if I honed my skills, we should play some Donkey Konga sometimes, because I think I think on 99 Red Balloons I'm pretty good. I love that game. I play that game so much.
Sounds like you might have a tandem partner, Hyle.
I've been looking for a partner with a high enough skill set to beat this game, and it would be very poetic if I found one in the studio head of Rare.
Okay. I mean, again, as well as a kind of RPG thing, I played Samba de Amiga. I myself and a friend of mine imported some of the original maracas on Dreamcast, so we played that. And then really, Donkey Konga was the sort of, our rhythm action successor to that. And then before the whole Rock Band, Plastic Instruments, Guitar Hero thing came in. But I love, like, literally myself and my wife used to play Donkey Konga, like, in the evenings drinking.
My now wife, then girlfriend, probably considered leaving me when I made her play with me.
So forgive me for not mentioning Donkey Kong Country, but hopefully the Donkey Konga thing might have maybe got me some kudos back. Maybe.
I think Sea of Thieves itself appeals to so many Donkey Kong Country 2 fans, just because it's got the whole the Greg Malesian pirate vibe to it that I think you've already done enough to placate the DKC fans in the audience.
And it's got bananas.
But I do have to take this interview to some dark territory. So I've got to bring this up while you're here. And it's kind of a long walk to get to this question. So please bear with me.
Okay.
So for a lot of people in the DK Vine community, Craig Duncan became more than a name in a headline when you gave an interview with the website GameSpot following the release of Kinect Sports Rivals. And this was really the first introduction to you for a lot of people in the Rare fan community. And looking back at this article now, it seems to be a bit combative and negative in tone, like they're taking your words and kind of trying to portray a narrative that was already kind of embedded within the gaming press at this time. And
I remember those interviews. They were fun.
The headline was New GoldenEye and Banjo on Xbox One. Rare says they aren't necessarily what you want. Rare boss Craig Duncan talks about Rare's future after Kinect Sports Rivals on Xbox One. So already that's a hell of an introduction.
Yeah.
And so from there you said, and I quote, "We're not going to go and remake the same game," which I think when people comment is what they say they want. And then the article conflated this quote with the long list of Rare classics that people obviously love, making it appear that you were dismissive towards the storied history of Rare. So you gave this quote, which almost has achieved meme-like status in our community over the years. And it's by the way, Cameron and I both agree with this quote 100%. It's just very humorous, parlayed with this kind of article that made Rare out to be the villains depriving you of a childhood renaissance.
Yeah,
so
I've played Kinect Sports Rivals and very much enjoyed it. So well, Hyle, you go ahead and read this off.
Go on, hit me with the quote. I honestly can't remember it. I'm just glad you didn't bring up the Who Killed Rare article, because that would have, that was the one that really infuriated me.
Which one? I mean, there's so many of them.
That was the Eurogamer one, but go ahead. No, I'm sure.
All right.
I want to hear it.
This is the quote. This is the quote you gave. We've made the best bowling ever. The best bowling that's ever been, ever on any platform. Which, again, to be fair, it was the best video game bowling that ever was. But I think just that was kind of the cherry on the top of this article. Rare says you don't actually want Banjo-Kazooie anymore. And first of all, could we get that quote on an official T-shirt? Like, if the proceeds could go to charity, that would be fine. But I would wear the hell out of that shirt.
I'm not sure I've ever
that's not actually
ever that many times ever in an interview.
Ever. Yeah. That's not actually the question I wanted to ask.
Okay.
But I know there are contingents on DK Vine that would be quite upset with me if I did not bring that up. Now, everything you just said makes absolute sense. And I know Cameron and I really get it, especially post Sea of Thieves, and especially playing Sea of Thieves and seeing Rare's new philosophy under your leadership. We wouldn't be getting Sea of Thieves if Rare was just concerned about which old property had its turn to revive next. And the important bit of context that this article left out was that a game like Sea of Thieves can embody everything we've ever loved about Rare in a new type of game, in a forward-thinking kind of experience. But at the time, this was this was like early 2014. Phil Spencer had just become head of Xbox, and there was still all of this kind of negativity in the fan base or in certain sectors of the fan base about Rare under Microsoft. And a lot of these misconceptions were, obviously thanks in part to Rare's secrecy up until that point, and also just the kind of cynicism of the culture around the gaming media, especially following Microsoft's purchase of the studio. And, I would like to say we were immune to it on DK Vine. We've obviously been supportive of everybody at Rare, but, we've kind of stumbled over the years with this, and we're on record. It's out there on episodes of this very podcast even, where we were, kind of trying to white knight the people of Rare, they're stuck in this corporate hierarchy, yada, yada, yada. But that's, obviously in the past. But looking at the list of games that we loved that had kind of failed to perform in the marketplace, Grab by the Ghoulies is, I think, a game that a lot of DK Viners just absolutely adore. And it was the first game on the Xbox platform, and it just kind of flopped, and it was just heartbreaking for us. And that kind of just set the tone for the next decade plus. And from the outside looking in, as diehard fans, we just had one blow after another. So all that being said, I have to ask you walked into this scenario that, by all appearances wasn't enviable. And you mentioned earlier in this episode that you were quite aware of it. And, most of what I quoted above was actually 3 years after you had joined Rare. So when you got there, what were your goals to move Rare into, more of a 21st century way of making games, to get the studios over those hurdles that were being continually laid out in front of it, to undo this negative perception that had taken root about what Rare is today? And how exactly have you been achieving that?
Wow, that's a good question. We might hit 4 hours after all. It's not about me. Like, I think that's the first thing. And I guess something I said earlier, which I'll reinstate, which is when someone isn't communicating a kind of vision or path or purpose, people will write their own. And there was a ton of certainly misrepresentation about what was going on at Rare. It wasn't this, shackled developer that was, being whipped by the corporate overlords to make the thing it didn't want to make. I think Rare was trying to figure out what it was trying to do, and it as the talented people at Rare did. And remember, some of those talented people that people were being very critical of are ultimately the brains behind Sea of Thieves, which honestly is one of the most innovative games I've ever had the pleasure of working on, and I hope and will do everything in my power to make it as successful as it can be. I think it was trying to figure itself out. It was trying to figure out what it wanted and do something new, and it tried a few areas, and some of it was Connect based and some of it was other things. I think just to kind of answer the question directly, when you essentially join a company as the boss, a lot of it is, you've got to kind of figure out what's there and what you've got. And I spent a lot of time, and this takes way more time than you think it would. It's not just a case of going in one day, calling a meeting together and saying, hey, what do we want? And, 150 people give you the same answer and tell you, oh, we should go do this. And then that's a new strategy and it becomes successful. It's obviously, way more complex than that. And there was some stuff that was great about the business, and there's some amazing people that are still there to this day, and there's some stuff that wasn't working, and we had to change that and change the structure and just get us focusing on making the right bets for Rare. And what's interesting when you do press interviews is there's stuff about and there's stuff that you can talk about, and those two things sometimes don't time it right. It's it wouldn't have done Can Xbox Rivals any good whatsoever, me talking about other stuff that we were incubating or looking at the time, which some of it was very formative Sea of Thieves stuff back then. But, if you think, and again, I'm not going to kind of call out GameSpot, but if we invite press to come and talk about a particular product and they probe me on other products, the only answer they're going to get is, hey, this game that I've invited you in to interview me about is actually what we're going to go talk about. Like, I'm not going to, and this shows how bad I was at my job then, I'm not going to give you a headline about something else when what I want you to do is write about the thing that you've told me you want to come in and cover. I'm obviously a bit better at press now because I obviously screwed that up and gave them a headline that wasn't what I wanted it to be. But we weren't ready then to go roll out what the changes to Rare were going to be and how we were going to work going forward and what kind of game we were going to build. Because really, we didn't want to talk about that until we released Rare Replay, and until we revealed Sea of Thieves, and we didn't want to reveal Sea of Thieves until we revealed Rare Replay, because I think I've told this story before in the press, is we wanted to celebrate the legacy and 30 years of Rare as well as announce a new IP. I love this notion of celebrating the history and the heritage and everything that is incredible about Rare as a studio, and announce the forward-looking thing. I mean, we could have held Sea of Thieves, and people have asked me about this, a year later. We could have done that first announce when you, Hyle, as well as other people that were in that play session played it for the first time, because that was super early anyway. But I got very, very excited and very passionate about, we're gonna tell a Rare history, Rare legacy, Rare Replay story, and tell a new Rare future story. But we were talking about that probably back at the time when I gave that interview. But I'm just in a position where I can say what ultimately I feel is okay. I mean, imagine if I'd have inadvertently said, "Hey, and we're working on some new IP," in that piece of press.
Right, absolutely.
Like, that would have been a whole, that would have been a, hey, Rare's not even believing in what it's doing because it's focused on the next thing. Like, it's tricky with that stuff. I mean, we knew we were having to pivot.
Well, yeah, and especially when you walk into a situation like that where people are ready to pick fault, and not necessarily the person who did that interview with you, but just people reading the article, they kind of are just already walking into it in a foul mood, and you're like damned if you do, I suppose. And after having met you for first time, E3 2015, it's just funny how all of those misconceptions that people had, mostly based off this very short article, were just completely wiped away. And I was trying to tell people, no, Craig Duncan, he's actually, this is the guy we want to be heading Rare. But that's one of the reasons I was so excited to get you on the show, because for me, it's important that people realize who you are and what your vision is for Rare, because when I left E3 2015, I realized Rare is in really good hands right now. And as a lifelong fan of Rare, it was just such a good feeling. It was like this kind of weight on you that you didn't realize was on you had been lifted, and it was just such this emotionally cathartic kind of release. And didn't want to put you on the spot there, but
no, it's a great conversation, and like I said, it's actually not about me. I mean, my role. I mean, it's an important role in the studio, but it's really about making sure the team get everything and all the support and all of the backing and all of the help they need to do awesome stuff. And and that goes both ways. That goes to going and having a walk around with Greg, who's talking about some new design ideas, and just having someone to proxy for that, right through to me catching up with Phil on what Xbox is trying to do, and therefore what Rare's trying to do, and making sure that we set Sea of Thieves up to be a success with an Xbox, and think beyond that as well. And what I know I've told you this, Hyle, but I think, going for anyone that's listening, what people can look at me to do is ultimately do absolutely everything in my power. And I work stupidly hard because I'm a kind of person that has worked stupidly hard for 15 years in everything I've done. And I will do anything to, make Rare and my team and everyone that's involved in anything that Rare does, be the best they can be. And I push the team hard, but I also support them and I challenge our business, but I also would do anything to make it successful. And being successful means making great games and making great games that people love to play. And that's the thing where, like I say, it's not about me and I'm not in it for me. I'm doing it because I'm passionate and I want Rare's legacy, during my time in the studio to be massively successful, and I want Rare to do games that will amaze people and the kind of games that only Rare would make. And that's where, and I think you kind of half-asked this, but half-asked this question, not half-asked this, because that would be quite insulting. But it's kind of funny when the old IP conversation comes in, and I love what we did with Rare Replay. Honestly, like, the team absolutely smashed it out of the park with that compilation. I mean, again, it's there's compilation and then there's Rare making a compilation, and we kind of set a new bar for what a heritage retro kind of look back collection was. But I don't think it's okay to just go make the same game that people loved before, but with up-to-date graphics and audio and all those things. Like, we have super talented people, and of course they have the heritage and, they know what makes Rare special, and it's not about what we had in those games, it's the people that make those games. That's what makes the game special. It's right. Greg's, it's the Robins, it's the Louise, it's the Chris Marlowe's. Like, it's all those people that have made all those amazing games that everyone remembers. But just making them again with whatever technology is available today, like that's not Rare. Like, and I think what Rare is doing the kind of games that only Rare would go do. Like, no one else would go make Sea of Thieves in the way we're making Sea of Thieves. And I think unless you've got a absolutely killer, amazing, and there are some there, I'm sure, idea for how you would bring maybe an existing IP or maybe one of those franchises and do something new with it from a gameplay paradigm or scenario, or something that could actually be genuinely different and innovative, I don't think you just redo them. Like, I think that would be the worst thing for Rare to do, honestly. Like, if I went and set Rare at, like, hey, go remake all of the stuff that was kind of successful at the time, but make it up to date, I don't think it would be good. And I don't think it would be relevant, and I don't think people would really want it. I think they might think they do, but I don't think they would. And that's probably where I got to in that GameSpot conversation. Like, but I think
you can convey that in a small little quote. It absolutely makes sense as a philosophy, and especially after playing Sea of Thieves. And I think anybody who's played Sea of Thieves will agree that, we would much rather have this experience than just, as much as we may want another Banjo-Kazooie game, obviously, this is just something completely new and fresh, and yet it can still embody that same kind of spirit and mentality that we love about Rare games in particular.
Yeah, unless, you can go think of a way that a new Banjo-Kazooie game could be, innovative and different and special and in a new way. Like, but I think doing the same, I mean, there's a reason video games have moved on in the way they have, and that's because, people have, whether it's Nintendo, whether it's Rare, whether it's, whether it's EA, whether it's Ubisoft, whether it's an indie team, like, people are innovating in gameplay, they're innovating in graphic design, they're innovating in art, in audio design, in animation, in AI, across all of these things. And it's not like, I think the game idea and the gameplay difference has to come first. And for Sea of Thieves, and I've told this story a ton of times, like we got really, really excited about this notion of players creating stories together and like going on an adventure with your friends in this rare crafted world, and just like think about that kind of initial kind of incubation and all those early meetings. And I remember Joe and Greg's first PowerPoint. It was like a black and white slides, and it was just entitled "Players Creating Stories Together." And they were like, "Hey, we're going to come up with this." And we didn't even have pirates at that point. It was just this notion of like, cooperative in a shared world. You could go out and it would be different every single time you played, because different players would be out on their own adventures, and just that idea excited us so much. And then it was just a case of, okay, what's the right aesthetic for that? What's the right tone for that? Is it serious? Is it humorous? Is it, and then that's where some of the rare charm and beauty, and you get Ryan Stevenson come in and go, yeah, everything should be slightly wonky and painted, and the world should look lived in, and that's how, like, and we've birthed a new IP that's, hopefully, and if I do my job right, people will talk about Sea of Thieves as a classic Rare game 10 years from now, 15 years from now, or even still be playing it. Like, that's the stuff that really, really excites me.
Well, I don't think you have to worry, because I think anybody in the technical alpha in the DK Vine community already thinks of it that way, and it's not even a finished game yet. So you definitely are onto a winning strategy here.
I hope so, because we can do this again in a year from now and talk about it. That will make me happy.
I wanted to thank everybody. So many people sent in questions that we could ask you. Unfortunately, of course, as these things always go, we run over in time. So
let's go. Let's do some questions. Come on, let's do it.
Oh, okay.
Come on,
Cameron, you read the first one.
Okay.
I told you we're going for 4 hours. I want to beat your record. Come on.
Okay. Well, our first question here is from a Kongversation mainstay, Tony Munoz, a.k.a. Mamechi.
Do I need to write these names down in case they tweet me and I don't remember? Okay.
It will be on the quiz later, so okay. Yeah.
Tony.
I'm just curious, but how involved does Rare get with its hardcore community of fans, such as DK Vine and their Twitter fans? I hope I'm not too eccentric. I just love Rare almost as much as I love Ducks.
I'm pretty sure this guy's tweeted me before. I'm sure he has. I'm trying to just kind of allay the question back. I think Hyle said it much better than I could right at the start. I mean, you have the legend that is Lee Loveday, that I think before game developers had community teams, kind of was a community team, and engaged with a ton of people that were Rare fans. Much like I think someone said earlier, it's like, hey, did I realize Rare had such passionate fans? I didn't realize Lee Loveday had such a passionate fan club, because I didn't, like, that was just something that just wasn't clear to me till I joined. That they used to write these newsletters. They had a name. What, you can tell me?
Scribes,
of course. And people used to engage with them, and because that just as even someone in the industry that was an observer of Rare, like, didn't even hit my radar. That was like the kind of core of core. And but for me, like, I and my Twitter profile, apologies for the food pics and wine pics and travel trainer pics and all the other crap stuff I tweet, which people do call me out on and say, hey, we only follow you because you're the head of Rare, which is nice. Thanks for that. But for me, I care deeply about Rare, and I care deeply about our team, and I care deeply about what we're trying to do, and fully appreciate anyone that supports us and gives us any support and backing. Whether that's Sea of Thieves or love for the legacy type. I love being at shows and having people come up saying, hey,
Banjo-Kazooie like made me get into gaming, or I played Cameo and it got me through a really tough time in my life, or and there's tons of stories like this where gaming really does just inspire and help and bring people together in a way that I kind of, it humbles me in terms of what we do. So I think like I'm always happy to go interact with it. I think like anyone, I think if someone goes, hey, Rare shouldn't be doing this, they should be going doing that, I'll kind of, gracefully go, hey, thanks for the feedback. But genuinely, like my team at Rare are accountable for what Rare does. And, unfortunately, like I've got to make the right bets on what Rare does in the future. And I'll try and do that based on, us having awesome ideas that we think people will love, and again, backing people like Greg and Joe and Ryan and Louise and Hugh and all the people that are way more talented than I am to go do awesome stuff. And if they come and tell me that players creating stories is a great idea and it's the next Rare game, and they convince me of that, then that's what we do, and that turns into Sea of Thieves, and we go build a game in a different way, and that becomes future Rare. Part of my job is to obviously ask those guys tough questions as well, but ultimately back the creative people in my team to do awesome stuff.
All right. Well, we also got another question. This is from another Kongversation mainstay, Scraps69, from the prestigious 69 family. He wants to know, can you please describe the particulars of your bromance with Joe Neate?
How do I answer this? Joe's engaged now, so I need to be very careful how I answer this. So I hired Joe and I brought him into Rare. So there's probably a kind of initial. Joe used to work for me at Sumo Digital. And the reason he worked for me at Sumo Digital is because he used to work for me at Midway, and I hired him into Sumo as well. So I've hired him twice, which probably is either a good indication that there is a bromance there, or probably more realistically that I rate him extremely highly in terms of what he does. And Joe, and this is going to sound very bromancy, Joe's one of these leaders that you would have in charge of any team, because he ultimately is very selfless in what he does, and again will do anything he can to support and include and do the best thing for his team and the game he's making all the time. Like he's exactly the kind of person you want running a game project, because he'll always be thinking about, what do players want, what do fans want, how do I help the team be successful, and a lot of the stuff we've done around the community and being open and transparent, and just making sure that Sea of Thieves has the tone and humor and fun. A lot of that is Joe, and Joe, basically, helping, Greg and Ryan and Pete and the team, Ted and the guys that are building Sea of Thieves, have that kind of cohesive vision. So part of my job is to hire amazing people and support amazing people or promote amazing people. And, Joe, as an EP for one of our projects, and Louise, who's the other EP in our business, they are great people at leading teams. I mean, they're and I'll be straight, Joe's a better EP than I am. That's why he's leading Sea of Thieves, and that's why I run the studio and do all the boring stuff to help him do that.
I hope that was titillating enough for you, Scraps, you weirdo.
We have one more question. I believe it's from Cameron Perry.
Okay, and, another Cameron. Are you sure it's that Cameron? It's not you, Cameron.
It's not me. I don't think it's Cameron Thomas either. Okay, I'll just go ahead and read this off here. Here's my extremely original question to ask Craig. Has Rare moved on as a studio from the types of games they used to make, a la Naughty Dog shifting from simple 3D platformers to epic AAA adventure games? We haven't seen them return to one of their classic franchises in nearly 10 years. Can we expect Rare to ever revive beloved IP like Banjo-Kazooie and Conquer, in ways that aren't just cameos and re-releases? Or is it time to accept they'll only live on in the hands of other devs, like with Killer Instinct, or spiritual successors like Yooka-Laylee?
This is one of those questions that gets me the wrong headline, isn't it? The guy from GameSpot literally listening to this right now.
Yeah, I think we've touched on this a little bit earlier in the episode.
We have, and I think, like, and again, I don't want to talk about other kind of studios and how they run their businesses, and like, I think for Rare, Rare has to build the kind of game that only Rare could make. And I know that's probably a bit of an odd answer to give, but I think back when Rare made games in the 90s and in the early 2000s, and even in the initial kind of Xbox era, I think it did make different games, and I think it tried to do games in a Rare way that were very different. And I think it was easier then than it is now. I mean, if you look at the amount of games that release now, I think Rare just docking to a genre that is like, hey, Rare should go make platform games, or Rare should go revive this IP because we know it's beloved and there's some great fans. I don't think that's right unless we have an absolutely killer idea to make that franchise amazing again and literally blow everything away. Like if it's just the kind of game that anyone can make, if it's just if it is a spiritual successor, or it is a character IP, or it's a game like something else with one of our IP, I personally, and while I'm the head of Rare, like, I don't think that's the right thing to put the talented folks at Rare on doing. But if we came up with something that was like, it's an infinite industry. Like, never say never. Like, if we came up with a killer idea that made sense for an IP, then of course you could go look at that. But it would have to make sense. I think the game idea has to come first, and then you figure out what the right thematic, aesthetic wrapper is, rather than starting from a point of going, hey, like, here's the IP, let's go come up with a hook for it. Like, I think that's almost the wrong way of building a game, if that makes sense.
Gaming headlines tomorrow. Head of Rare hates Rare. No.
And again, I love the Rare games as much as anything, but I just think you've got to come up with like something innovative. Like Rare, all of Rare's legacy has been built on innovation, and Conker was highly innovative. Banjo was like these games. I mean, if there was the internet back then when Rare made Banjo, do you think, the internet or a podcast would be going, hey, Rare shouldn't make Banjo, they should remake Battletoads? Like,
I've mentioned on this show in the past that when Banjo-Kazooie and then Conker's Quest were announced at E3 97, I wasn't online. I was just a kid, reading the gaming magazines, but I was upset that it wasn't 3D Donkey Kong. And I was, once upon a time, Banjo and Conker were just these aberrations from the true essence of Rare. So you're absolutely correct. And I just wish people could have more faith in the studio they purport to love.
The philosophy is compelling. It just doesn't make a catchy soundbite. And I think that makes it hard to communicate.
It is difficult. And like I say, it's an ever-changing industry. And you've always got to look at, what's the industry now. And again, one of the hardest things we do is like, where do we think it's going to be, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And it's not like, don't take from my answer that it's a never.
conversation, because, like I say, if you find the right idea, the right team, what 15 years of making games have told me is you bet on people. Like, it's not about an idea you come up with in a boardroom. Like, if you've got a team that are super passionate about building something that has, some gameplay magic that, we knew from the very first Sea of Thieves idea, but then Sea of Thieves prototype, we knew we had something special. Like, okay, there's a ton of work gone in since then, and hundreds of people, and all this effort, but we knew because we got really excited about it. And I think when you've got that, and that's what, and you're actually betting on the people, and it was that kind of core Sea of Thieves team, and the people I've mentioned, and Andy and Shelley, and the ton of people that you've seen across all the podcasts and all those things, just genuinely getting super excited about what we were building, and that's what you bet on. You bet on that team and that excitement and that idea, not the kind of, hey, let's go do something with this and try and find something that makes it work. And that can be a new IP or an old IP, but it's that excitement and team and passion is what you bet on.
And I definitely think that people are more understanding of that than they were back in, say, 2014, especially, since 2015. We refer to this as the Rare-naissance, and there's a reason for that. So I feel like you don't really have to worry so much about it. Those voices have kind of gotten quieter as the accolades for Sea of Thieves have definitely started stockpiling.
And new voices are popping up all the time. I'm having friends of mine who, I don't normally associate with the sort of Rare brand of Rare fandom I buy into, just sort of join the conversation with me about, did you see what Sea of Thieves is doing? And I get to tell them, you can join the Insider program right now, and I get to watch them be ecstatic when I tell them that's a possibility. It's very nice to see.
And it doesn't mean I'm more than happy to be accountable if someone has a view on Rare and they want to engage with me, whether that's in a conversation or on Twitter, or I love talking about our business and what we do, and Rare's games and backcard, and again, I'll bow to the greater knowledge of you guys and your community. You guys probably know and involve yourself in the Rare history more than I do, and again, no matter how much I kind of try and keep up with that, but I'm more than happy to have chats and engagement on that. But I just people should know I'll always want the best for Rare and Rare's team. That's why I do what I do.
Well, on that note, I want to go out on one last question, because I've actually run out of any more to take us through the next 2 hours and 45 minutes. So
I signed up for a 4-hour podcast. You guys have let me down.
I'm terribly sorry. It's
just call this part 1, and we can.
I'm joking.
You've mentioned 5-10 years down the line. Well, as you brought up earlier, you've been with Rare for around 6 years now.
Yeah.
So long term, where do you see Rare 6 years from today?
I'm not even sure I know how to answer. We do a lot of things on and again, this sounds very boring and corporate. We do a lot of things on strategy, on what Rare's mission should be, what gaming trends are doing, where do we think the industry's going, what kind of games do we think, what trends are we seeing, as well as what cool ideas have we got that we think are untapped spaces. So for me, obviously we have a very near-term massive focus on Sea of Thieves, but it's definitely and I think Phil and I both said this when we did our inside story at Rare. Sea of Thieves was a multi-year investment and commitment for Rare. We've been making the game for a few years now, but we love the idea of supporting it. when Sea of Thieves launches early 2018, and if people keep playing it, and we have a ton of ideas that we will make sure we get in before it launches, and there's a ton of stuff in progress that's really cool that I could spend hours talking about, although Joe and Greg and Mike and Ryan all shoot me for leaking things.
Nobody's listening to this. It's okay.
Yeah, I know that's not true. I listen to it. That's why I agreed to come on. But that's something that I'm really excited about. We're going to launch a game that we want to continue to add to and evolve over time, and that's really exciting. And I think that's kind of the way entertainment and the industry's going, and not just if you look at Rare's legacy, and games would release and a new platform would launch, and then that game would drop into either whether it's a retro compilation or just unavailability. I think we're now in this world, and actually, and this isn't corporate speak, this is pure, like, genuinely what I believe. Like, I love Phil's vision where it's like, you should be able to play with your friends, independent of devices, and your game should stay with you forever, even if you move up to new generation of console, or play on PC, or whatever that is. And I think that's exactly right. So I love this idea of everything Rare makes still being there and available and being able to play. And if people either still play Sea of Thieves a year, 2 years from now, or discover it 3 years from now, because it's ultimately there in a games library and they can download it, and they don't need to go buy a retro console from eBay and hook it up to a TV that's got some plug that's not a HDMI anymore, it's some new thing. I love this idea of games without boundaries, and I think what Greg and Mike and Joe and Ryan and Pete, and I'm missing a ton of people out. I should list the whole credit list of 150 people that are currently doing awesome stuff on Sea of Thieves.
That's how we can fill up the 4 hours.
I should do that. We're building a game that should live beyond the current generation and vogue of games. Like, I hope people look at Sea of Thieves in 5 years from now and go, hey, that game looks amazing and it's great and it's awesome to go on pirate adventures with my friends and look at all the cool stuff they've done since it's released. But that doesn't mean we're not going to go do other things as well. So I love this idea of us having a game that we continue to support and do cool things, because anyone that plays and invests in Sea of Thieves, I want us to reward that and pay that back by keeping evolving the game. But I want us to do more as well. So for me, I want Rare to be known as a studio that makes incredible games. I want Rare to be known as a studio that does innovative new things. I want Rare to be known as a studio that cares and works super openly and really transparently with its community and the fans of its games. And I think as a studio, if we can do all those things and keep making great games in the only way Rare can, that would make me super proud and very very happy with my role as being part of this great studio.
Well, we're looking forward to experiencing the voyage along with. I left my pirate euphemism book on the other shelf in the other room, so I apologize. But seriously, thank you for being here, Craig. It's been a pleasure and an honor for you to grace us with your presence.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a thrill.
Hey, no, thank you, guys. I mean, you've been big advocates for our studio through good times and bad, and that is appreciated. And again, the support that both yourself and like I say, Chad. I caught up with Chad in New York when I was out there doing some press last week, and the DK Vine community and the folks I engage with on Twitter. Like, it's important to us as Rare that not only new fans that we are obviously bringing in with Sea of Thieves, but people that have loved Rare and Rare's been a part of their life, stick with us and respect what we do. That is important to us. So I just want to say thank you to you guys and your community as well for believing in Rare and we will do our best to make great games that we hope you love, and thank you for all your support for us.
Thank you, and thanks for being here.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico!